Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to English in Fluency. My name is Alex, and I am so glad you've chosen to spend some time with me today. This is a space where we do more than just practice English vocabulary and grammar. We explore the very human experiences that connect us all, using language as our bridge to deeper understanding. We believe that growing your English skills isn't just about learning new words. It's about discovering new ways to think, new perspectives to see the world through, and new tools to navigate the beautiful and sometimes challenging journey of life. The words we learn and the ideas we explore are woven together. As our vocabulary expands, so does our capacity for self-awareness and connection. And the topic we are diving into today is one that is universally human. It touches every single one of us, regardless of where we are from, the language we speak, or the culture that has shaped us. We are going to have a gentle, honest, and supportive conversation about frustration, stress, and depression. We'll explore how to finally understand the real difference between them, and more importantly, how we can begin to take back control when these feelings feel overwhelming. Now, you might be wondering why this is so important. Well, just take a look at the world around us. We are living in an age of incredible speed and constant demand. Everything seems to be accelerating. Technology evolves in the blink of an eye. Work deadlines become tighter and tighter. And there is an unspoken expectation for instant replies, immediate results, and relentless productivity. It often feels as though the world has lost its pause button. In the midst of this whirlwind of activity and noise, our inner world, our emotions, can start to feel incredibly heavy. We might find ourselves boiling with frustration over something seemingly small, like a video that refuses to load when our internet connection is slow. We might feel the crushing weight of stress as our responsibilities at work, at school, or within our families begin to pile up, leaving us feeling like we're drowning in a sea of obligations. And sometimes, when these feelings linger for too long, when the clouds don't seem to part, they can sink much deeper, transforming into depression, which can feel like a dense, persistent fog that isolates us from the warmth and light of life. But here is a crucial point, a point that is often missed. Many of us unintentionally confuse these three powerful emotional states. We might use the words frustration and stress as if they mean the same thing, or we might dismiss a long period of deep sadness as just a bad mood, when it could be depression. If we don't have the clarity to know what we are truly feeling, how can we possibly hope to address it in a meaningful and effective way? It's a bit like trying to repair a car that has broken down without knowing anything about engines. You might spend all your time and energy changing the tires, polishing the windows, and checking the lights, while the real problem lies deep inside the engine, completely ignored. In the very same way, if we mix up frustration, stress, and depression, we risk applying the wrong solutions. We might tell ourselves to just try harder when we are frustrated, when what we really need is a new strategy. We might try to organize our schedule better to deal with stress, when what we truly need is to reduce our workload or ask for help. And we might tell someone experiencing depression to simply cheer up, a suggestion that is not only unhelpful, but can also be deeply hurtful. So, in our time together today, I want to walk with you, step by step, through this emotional landscape. We are going to explore what each of these words, frustration, stress, and depression, truly means in the context of our real, everyday lives. We will use examples and stories that feel authentic and relatable, not just cold definitions from a textbook. And most importantly, I want to gently invite you to turn inwards and reflect on your own experiences. This isn't intended to be a lecture where I simply talk and you listen. This is a shared space for you to think, to connect the dots in your own life, and perhaps to see yourself in the stories we explore together. Have you ever felt so intensely frustrated with a task that you wanted to scream or just give up entirely? Have you ever felt the physical sensation of stress? That tightness in your chest, that knot in your stomach, as if a heavy weight is pressing down on you? Or have you ever suspected that the sadness you feel isn't just a fleeting emotion, but something deeper, something stickier, something much harder to escape from? These are the kinds of honest questions we will sit with together. My goal is not to make this episode feel heavy or somber. Quite the opposite. I hope that by the end, you feel a sense of clarity, encouragement, and perhaps even freedom. Because when you truly understand your emotions, they no longer have complete power over you. You are no longer just reacting to them. Instead, you are in a position to respond to them with wisdom and care. You are in control. And when you step into that place of control, life can begin to feel lighter, more manageable, and filled with a renewed sense of hope. That is the empowering message I want to share with you today. So, I invite you now to take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders relax. Find a comfortable position, and get ready to join me on this journey of discovery and self-awareness. Let's begin with frustration. Frustration is one of those emotions that is so common, so familiar to every human being. Yet it can be surprisingly difficult to pin down with words. In its simplest form, frustration is the feeling that arises when an obstacle is blocking you from achieving a goal you desire. Imagine you are trying to untangle a delicate necklace chain. You can see how it should be, straight and perfect. But every time you try to loosen one knot, you seem to create another. You twist it. You gently pull. You try to follow the path of the chain, but it only seems to get worse. That rising feeling of irritation, that sense of being stuck and powerless against a small but persistent problem. That is the very essence of frustration. It isn't quite anger, which is often hotter and more explosive. And it isn't quite sadness, which is usually heavier and more passive. Frustration exists in that tense space in between. It is the emotional alarm that rings inside us, shouting, "I want this to happen. I need this to work, but it's not working." In our daily lives, frustration can ambush us from countless directions. One of the most classic and universal examples is being stuck in a traffic jam. You are on your way to an important meeting, or perhaps you are excited to get home after a long day. But the cars in front of you are a sea of red brake lights, moving at a glacial pace. You check the time on your phone. You tap your fingers restlessly on the steering wheel. You let out a long, heavy sigh. Nothing you do can change the situation, but inside, you can feel that simmering heat of impatience and helplessness building up. That is pure frustration. Technology, our supposed servant, is another frequent source of this feeling. Let's be honest. How many times have you been in the middle of writing a crucial email or filling out a long online application, only for your internet connection to suddenly drop? You restart the router. You refresh the page a dozen times. You plead with your computer. But the little icon just keeps spinning, and your progress is lost. Or perhaps your phone's battery decides to die in the middle of an important phone call, cutting you off at the worst possible moment. In the grand scheme of life, these are minor inconveniences, but they can trigger a disproportionately strong feeling of frustration because they interrupt our momentum and block our immediate goals. Frustration also emerges in more personal and meaningful areas of our lives. Think about the experience of studying relentlessly for an exam. You spend weeks reviewing notes, reading chapters, and sacrificing your free time. But when you get your grade back, it doesn't even come close to reflecting the immense effort you invested. Or consider the journey of learning a new language like English. You spend hours practicing your pronunciation, memorizing vocabulary, and building sentences in your head. But when you find yourself in a real, spontaneous conversation with a native speaker, the words suddenly feel foreign in your mouth, and they just don't come out with the fluency you had hoped for. These are moments of setback, instances where the reality we face does not align with the hopes and expectations we held. It is in this gap, the space between what we want and what we get, that frustration takes root and grows. I vividly remember a time when I decided to learn how to play the guitar. I bought a beautiful acoustic guitar. I watched countless online tutorials, and I practiced the basic chords every single day. The videos made it look so easy, so effortless, but my fingers felt clumsy and slow. The sound I produced was a dull, buzzing noise, not the clear, bright notes I heard in the lessons. I would press down on the strings until my fingertips were sore, but the chord still sounded wrong. After about 2 weeks of this, I remember a particular evening when I was trying to switch between two simple chords, G and C. I tried over and over again, but my fingers just couldn't move fast enough. I felt a wave of heat rush to my face. I put the guitar down, and for a moment, I honestly considered putting it back in its case and never touching it again. That powerful urge to just give up. That was frustration in its purest form. I had invested my time and energy. I had a clear expectation of the result I wanted, a simple, beautiful sound. And when that result didn't materialize, I felt blocked, incompetent, and deeply annoyed. Looking back on it now, I can smile at my own impatience, but in that moment, the feeling was incredibly real and powerful. And that's a key characteristic of frustration. It has a tendency to magnify small problems, making them feel like insurmountable mountains. What's truly fascinating about frustration is that it can act as a fork in the road, pushing us in one of two very different directions. On one path, frustration can become a powerful motivator. It can ignite a fire within us to try harder, to think more creatively, to seek out a different solution to the problem. For instance, a student who is frustrated with a low grade might be driven to completely overhaul their study habits, join a study group, or seek extra help from their teacher. Their frustration becomes the fuel for positive change. On the other path, however, frustration can become a source of profound discouragement. If that same student feels frustrated test after test, they might begin to internalize the belief that they are simply not smart enough, that no amount of effort will ever be sufficient. When frustration morphs into a sense of hopelessness, it becomes a dangerous territory, because that is the path that can lead down the slippery slope toward chronic stress and even depression. This is precisely why learning to recognize frustration in its early stages is such a vital skill. It's a perfectly natural human emotion. We all experience it, but our response to it is what truly defines its impact on our lives. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is to simply name the feeling. To pause and say to yourself, "Okay, I am feeling frustrated right now." This simple act of labeling creates a small but crucial space between you and the emotion. It's like pressing a pause button on your automatic reaction. And in that moment of pause, you grant yourself the power of choice. You can ask yourself, do I want to keep pushing against this wall? Or do I need to step back, take a few deep breaths, and approach this from a different angle? Frustration is also intimately linked to our expectations. The higher and more rigid our expectations are, the more susceptible we are to feeling frustrated. Think about people who identify as perfectionists, those who believe that everything they do must be absolutely flawless. For a perfectionist, even a tiny mistake can feel like a catastrophic failure. This mindset is a recipe for chronic frustration because life, in its very nature, is imperfect and unpredictable. On the other hand, if you can learn to cultivate a more flexible mindset, if you can accept that things will not always go according to plan, you can significantly diminish the power that frustration holds over you. This doesn't mean you stop caring or striving for excellence. It simply means you give yourself and the world permission to be human. So now, I invite you to take a moment for a gentle reflection. When was the last time you felt that familiar heat of frustration rising within you? What was the situation? And more importantly, how did you respond? Did you lash out in anger? Did you withdraw and give up? Or did you manage to find a way to soothe yourself and try again? Take a second to really think about that moment, because the way you handle these smaller, everyday frustrations can reveal a great deal about how you are likely to cope with the bigger, more significant challenges life throws your way. And always remember, frustration itself is not your enemy. It is a messenger. It's delivering a valuable piece of information about what you care about, what you value, and what you want. Once you learn to listen to that message, you can begin to choose your response with greater wisdom and calm. Now let's move on to our second key emotion: stress. Stress is another word that has become a constant feature of our modern vocabulary, but it's often misused or misunderstood. Stress is not the same thing as frustration. While frustration typically arises from a single specific blockage, a slow internet connection, a missed bus, a difficult puzzle, stress is more about a feeling of overwhelming pressure. It's the sensation that there are too many demands on your time, your energy, and your resources, and you don't feel you have what it takes to handle them all. If frustration is like being stuck in front of a locked door, stress is like trying to juggle 10 glass balls at once, terrified that at any moment they will all come crashing down. It feels like being pulled in a dozen different directions simultaneously, or like carrying a heavy backpack that gets loaded with another heavy stone with each new responsibility you take on. One of the most important distinctions to understand about stress is that it can be either short-term or long-term. Short-term stress, sometimes called acute stress, occurs when you are facing an immediate challenge or a deadline. For example, imagine you have a major presentation to give at work tomorrow. You spend the evening reviewing your slides, practicing your speech, and you can feel your heart beating a little faster. You might feel a surge of adrenaline. That is short-term stress. In situations like this, it can actually be beneficial. It can sharpen your focus, heighten your alertness, and mobilize your energy to perform at your best. A small dose of stress before an exam, a job interview, or a public speaking event can provide the motivational push we need to prepare thoroughly and rise to the occasion. The real danger, however, begins when stress doesn't go away. When it lingers for weeks, months, or even years, it transforms into long-term or chronic stress. This is what happens when the demands placed upon you are relentless, and you never get a chance to fully recover and recharge. Perhaps you are dealing with a high-pressure job with impossible deadlines, while also caring for young children and worrying about financial stability. Every single day feels like running a marathon for which there is no finish line in sight. In this state of chronic stress, the impact is not just mental or emotional. It begins to take a serious toll on your physical body. You might start experiencing frequent headaches, digestive problems, or find it incredibly difficult to fall asleep at night, even when you feel exhausted. Some people lose their appetite completely, while others may turn to food for comfort, leading to unhealthy eating habits. Over an extended period, chronic stress can weaken your immune system, making you more susceptible to illnesses, and it is a major contributing factor to serious health problems like heart disease. Let's consider some common, real-life examples. A university student during their final exam period might feel intense stress, not just because of one challenging test, but because they have to study for 4 or 5 different subjects simultaneously, with each exam carrying significant weight for their future. A new parent might experience chronic stress as they try to balance the demands of their career with the sleepless nights and constant needs of a newborn baby. An employee might feel perpetually stressed because their manager has unrealistic expectations, constantly assigns more work than is manageable, and sends emails at all hours of the night, blurring the lines between work and personal life. In each of these scenarios, the stress isn't coming from one small, isolated obstacle. It's born from a continuous, ongoing sense of being completely and utterly overwhelmed. What complicates our relationship with stress is the way modern society often portrays it. In many professional and academic cultures today, being constantly busy is almost worn like a badge of honor. People almost brag about how little sleep they get, how many hours they work per week, or how their schedule is packed from morning until night with no room to breathe. You might hear someone say, "Oh, I'm just so stressed lately. I have back-to-back meetings all day." But they say it with a hint of pride, as if being stressed is tangible proof of their importance, their dedication, or their success. Social media often pours fuel on this fire. As you scroll through your feeds, you are bombarded with images and posts of people hustling, grinding, and celebrating a culture of non-stop work. This can create a subtle but pervasive feeling of guilt whenever you try to rest. The implicit message is loud and clear. If you are not busy, if you are not stressed, you are not doing enough with your life. But this way of thinking is not just unhealthy, it is dangerous. Stress should never be treated as a status symbol. It is not something to aspire to or to wear like a medal of achievement. Stress is a vital signal from your body and your mind, telling you that you are under too much pressure and that your resources are being depleted. Ignoring that signal, or worse, pretending it's a sign of strength, will only lead to burnout and illness in the long run. It is so important to remember that there is a profound difference between being passionate and working hard towards your goals, and living in a constant state of high-alert stress. One can build you up and give you a sense of purpose. The other will inevitably break you down. Another critical point to remember is that stress is often invisible. People can become masters at hiding how they truly feel. They might show up to work with a smile, engage in conversation, and complete all their tasks, but internally, they are feeling completely exhausted and on the edge of collapse. We cannot always see stress in others, and sometimes we are not even honest with ourselves about the level of stress we are experiencing. We might tell ourselves and others, "I'm fine, just a bit tired," when the reality is that we are drowning under the weight of the pressure. This is why learning to recognize the early signs of chronic stress is so crucial. Take a moment to ask yourself these questions. Do I frequently feel physical tension in my body, like tight shoulders or a clenched jaw? Do I find myself constantly thinking about work or my list of responsibilities, even when I'm supposed to be relaxing? Do I find it difficult to enjoy the activities and hobbies that used to bring me joy? If your answers are yes, it might be a sign that stress is exerting more control over your life than you realize. The hopeful news is that stress, unlike the deeper condition of depression, is often very manageable when you take proactive and conscious steps. Simple actions like scheduling short breaks throughout your day, learning to prioritize your tasks, practicing the art of saying no when your plate is already full, and finding healthy outlets for your tension, such as exercise, creative hobbies, or talking to a supportive friend, can all make a significant difference. These actions don't necessarily make your problems vanish, but they create breathing room. They allow you to put down that heavy backpack for a little while, to rest, and to find the strength to carry it more comfortably when you pick it up again. So, the next time you feel that familiar sense of being overwhelmed, I encourage you to pause for just a moment. Ask yourself, is this a short-term stress, like the pressure before a performance, or has this feeling become a long-term, constant companion in my daily life? That single moment of reflection can be a powerful catalyst for change, because awareness is always the first step. This brings us to depression. Depression is a word that we hear used quite casually in conversation, but its true meaning is often misunderstood. It is not uncommon for people to say, "I'm so depressed," when what they really mean is, "I'm feeling very sad today," or "I'm feeling disappointed." But true depression is a condition that is vastly different and much deeper than a fleeting feeling of sadness. It is not about feeling down for a few hours after a bad day, or even for a couple of days after a significant disappointment. Depression is a serious and persistent emotional struggle that fundamentally alters the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you are able to function in your daily life. If frustration is like repeatedly hitting a wall, and stress is like carrying an impossibly heavy backpack, then depression is more like trying to walk through a thick, cold fog. In this fog, everything appears muted and gray. The path ahead is unclear, and nothing seems to hold any real meaning or warmth. One of the most defining signs of depression is a profound loss of interest or pleasure in activities that you once found enjoyable. There is a clinical term for this, anhedonia. Imagine a person who used to find immense joy in painting, who would lose themselves for hours in the colors and textures on a canvas. When depression takes hold, that same person might look at their art supplies with complete indifference. The passion is gone, replaced by a feeling of emptiness. The activities that once filled their life with color and purpose suddenly feel like chores. Another very common sign is a debilitating lack of energy. Simply getting out of bed in the morning can feel like a monumental task, like trying to climb Mount Everest. Simple, everyday tasks that most people perform without a second thought. Brushing your teeth, taking a shower, preparing a simple meal, or even replying to a text message can feel utterly exhausting, requiring more energy than you feel you possess. Depression makes the ordinary business of living feel impossibly heavy. The mind also undergoes a significant shift during a depressive episode. Negative thoughts tend to become louder, more persistent, and much more difficult to ignore or challenge. You might find yourself caught in a loop of self-critical thoughts, such as, "I'm a failure," "I'm not good enough," "Nothing I do ever works out," or a sense of hopelessness might take over, with thoughts like, "Things will never get better. Why should I even bother trying?" This pervasive self-doubt and pessimism can become a constant companion, making it feel as though hope is a distant, unreachable star. Unlike stress, which is often triggered by external pressures and demands, depression is more of an internal state. It fundamentally changes your internal filter, the lens through which you view yourself, your life, and the world around you. And what makes it so incredibly challenging is the persistence of these feelings. They don't just appear during a particularly busy week at work or a stressful exam period. They linger, day after day, for weeks, months, or in some cases, even longer. It is absolutely crucial to understand that depression is not a sign of weakness. It is not a character flaw. It is not laziness. And it is certainly not something a person can simply snap out of by trying to think more positively or forcing themselves to smile. Depression is a legitimate medical condition, just as real as diabetes or asthma. Our society has come to understand that our physical bodies can get sick, but there is still a long way to go in accepting that our minds can get sick too. We would never blame someone for having a high fever or for breaking their leg. Yet we, or others, can be quick to judge those who are struggling with their mental health. Blame and judgment only exacerbate the problem, adding a layer of shame to the already heavy burden of the illness. What people experiencing depression truly need is not judgment, but compassion, patience, understanding, and unwavering support. Think for a moment about how this topic is treated in our society. In many cultures around the world, there is still a significant stigma attached to mental health issues. People who are struggling are sometimes told things like, "You just need to be stronger," or "Stop being so dramatic," or "Look at all the good things in your life. Other people have it so much worse." These phrases, while perhaps well-intentioned, can be incredibly damaging. They invalidate the person's experience and can make them feel even more isolated and misunderstood. When you are in the depths of depression, you already feel profoundly alone. Hearing that your struggle is not being taken seriously can cause you to shut down completely, making it even less likely that you will reach out for the help you need. This is why open, honest conversations like the one we are having today are so vitally important. The more we talk about depression, the more we normalize it as a human experience that many people go through, and the more we can dismantle the walls of shame and silence that surround it. Perhaps you are asking yourself, how can I tell the difference between normal sadness and clinical depression? This is an excellent and important question. Sadness is a natural human emotion that is usually tied to a specific cause. Perhaps you experienced a loss, failed to achieve a goal, or had a conflict with someone you love. While sadness can be intensely painful, it tends to come in waves, and with time and changing circumstances, it usually lessens its grip. Depression, on the other hand, often feels like a constant, pervasive state that hangs over you, even when there is no clear or obvious reason for it. It lingers, it persists, and it impacts nearly every aspect of your life, from your sleep and appetite to your relationships and your ability to work. If you notice that you have been feeling hopeless, empty, unmotivated, and have lost interest in life for more than 2 consecutive weeks, that is often a sign that it's time to pay closer attention and seek support. And here is the most important message I want to convey in this section. If you think you might be experiencing depression, please hear me when I say that you do not have to endure this alone. Reaching out and talking to someone you trust, a close friend, a family member, a teacher, or a professional, can make an immeasurable difference. Sometimes, the simple act of putting your feelings into words and having them heard by another person can lift a small part of the weight. For many people, speaking with a therapist, counselor, or doctor can provide them with the right tools, strategies, and in some cases, treatments to begin their recovery. Please remember that seeking help is not a sign of weakness. On the contrary, it is an act of incredible courage and strength. It means you are taking responsibility for your health and well-being, just as you would if you had a persistent physical illness. So, let me gently remind you, depression is real, and it is serious, but it is also treatable. Recovery is possible. People do get better, and life can and will become brighter again. And if you are not experiencing depression yourself, but you know someone who might be, the greatest gift you can offer them is to listen without judgment. Create a safe space for them to share their experience, show them you understand, and gently remind them that they are not alone. As we reflect on this, ask yourself, have you ever mistaken deep sadness for something else? Do you know someone who might be struggling in silence, wearing a mask to hide their pain? These are vital questions, because the more we recognize depression for what it truly is, the better equipped we will be to respond to ourselves and to others with the kindness, compassion, and care that is so desperately needed. When we examine frustration, stress, and depression as separate concepts, they can seem like distinct and unrelated experiences. And in many ways, they are. They feel different, they arise from different circumstances, and they affect us in different ways. However, if you observe them more closely, you will begin to see that they are often deeply and dangerously interconnected. In fact, one can very easily lead to the other if it is not addressed with awareness and care. A useful way to visualize this connection is to think of them as steps on a steep and slippery slope. If you are not paying attention to where you are stepping, you can find yourself sliding from one level down to the next without even fully realizing what is happening. The journey down this slope often begins with frustration. You encounter a minor obstacle. Something doesn't go the way you had planned or expected, and you feel that familiar spike of annoyance. Let's imagine a character. We'll call him Leo. Leo starts a new job where he needs to master a complex piece of software. At first, he feels optimistic, but as he tries to use the program, he keeps encountering error messages he doesn't understand. A simple task that should take 10 minutes ends up taking an hour. He feels that hot, prickly sensation of frustration. He thinks, "This shouldn't be so hard." These individual moments of frustration are a normal part of learning something new. Everyone experiences them. But what happens if this frustration is not just a one-time event? What if it happens every single day? If Leo doesn't find a way to manage this feeling, perhaps by asking a colleague for help, finding a better tutorial, or simply taking a short break when he feels overwhelmed, that frustration begins to accumulate. It starts to build up, like steam in a sealed container. When this unresolved frustration continues to pile up, it frequently evolves into stress. Leo is no longer just frustrated with the software. Now, a project deadline is looming. The pressure is on. His initial momentary frustration has now transformed into a chronic, ongoing state of stress. His thoughts start to spiral. He's not just thinking, "This program is annoying." He's now thinking, "What if I can't figure this out in time? What if I fail on this project? My boss will think I'm incompetent. I might lose my job." Do you see the shift? The problem has grown from a single specific obstacle into a pervasive worry about his performance, his reputation, and his entire future. Instead of facing one small problem, Leo now feels as if he is surrounded by a sea of pressure. This is where the slope becomes particularly slippery. The stress starts to manifest physically. Leo finds it hard to sleep at night because his mind is racing. He has a constant, dull headache. He feels tense and irritable all the time. If he doesn't find a way to manage this high level of stress, he is at risk of sliding even further down. Day by day, the chronic stress begins to drain Leo's energy and chip away at his resilience. He might start to lose interest in his work altogether. He might begin to think, "Why do I even bother trying so hard? It doesn't make a difference anyway. I'm just not good at this." The motivation he once had disappears, replaced by a sense of apathy. The negative mindset solidifies. He starts to withdraw from his colleagues, avoiding conversations because he feels ashamed of his struggles. He stops enjoying the hobbies that used to relax him on the weekends. What began as a simple, manageable frustration over a piece of software has now spiraled down into a deeper struggle with hopelessness and despair. This is the path to depression. We can observe this dangerous pattern in so many different areas of life. In relationships, a person might feel frustrated when their partner consistently doesn't listen to their needs. If this frustration is never addressed through open communication, it can fester and grow into stress about the health and future of the relationship itself. And if that stress continues unresolved for a long period, it can eventually lead to depression, characterized by feelings of being unloved, unwanted, and completely alone, even when you are with someone. The crucial takeaway here is that none of these emotional states exist in a vacuum. They are often linked in a chain reaction. Frustration is like the initial warning light flashing on your car's dashboard. Stress is the louder, more urgent alarm bell that starts to ring. And depression can be the consequence of ignoring both of those signals for too long. This does not mean that every single moment of frustration will inevitably lead to depression. Of course not. In a healthy cycle, we feel frustrated, we find a solution, or we accept the situation, and we move on. But it is when we repeatedly suppress these feelings, when we deny their existence or tell ourselves it's not a big deal, that we give them the power to grow in the dark. We allow them to fester and combine until they become something much larger and more difficult to manage. This is why cultivating self-awareness is not just a nice idea. It is a fundamental act of self-preservation. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Can you identify times when you have ignored small, nagging frustrations until they snowballed into bigger problems? Do you have a tendency to tell yourself, "I'll just push through it," or "I'll deal with it later," only to discover that later the pressure has doubled or tripled? Most of us have done this at some point in our lives. It's a very human response. But when we can see this connection between frustration, stress, and depression clearly, we begin to understand that addressing frustration in its early stages isn't just about solving a small, immediate problem. It's about protecting our long-term mental and emotional well-being. Imagine a tiny crack in a large dam. At first, it's just a small trickle of water. It seems insignificant. But if that crack is ignored, the constant pressure of the water will cause it to widen. The trickle will become a stream, and eventually, the structural integrity of the entire dam could be compromised, leading to a catastrophic failure. Frustration is that first tiny crack. Stress is the widening of that crack under pressure. And depression can be the collapse that occurs when nothing is done to repair the initial damage. The earlier we intervene, the easier it is to prevent a much bigger disaster. So, the empowering question we must ask ourselves is this: how do I typically respond to the very first signs of frustration? Do I recognize them for what they are? Do I allow myself to pause, to breathe, to reflect, and to adjust my approach or my expectations? Or do I just grit my teeth and push forward, letting that negative energy accumulate until it becomes something much heavier? Being radically honest with yourself in answering this question is a game changer, because the slope only remains slippery as long as you continue to ignore the warning signs. The moment you decide to pay attention, you can plant your feet firmly on the ground and stop the slide before it even gathers momentum. When we discuss these heavy topics of frustration, stress, and even depression, it can be easy to feel a sense of helplessness. But I want to share with you an encouraging and empowering truth. We are not merely passive victims of our emotions. Yes, these feelings are real. Yes, they can be incredibly powerful. But the way we choose to respond to them can make all the difference in the world. This is where the incredible power of our mindset and our perspective comes into play. If frustration is the initial spark and stress is the growing fire, then our mindset is the essential tool we can use to manage the flames before they rage out of control. One of the most transformative mindset shifts we can make is to consciously move away from perfectionism and towards a celebration of progress. So many of us are trapped in the cycle of perfectionism without even being aware of it. Perfectionism is the rigid belief that everything we do must be completely flawless, without a single mistake or failure. In theory, it might sound like a noble aspiration, but in reality, it is a guaranteed recipe for chronic frustration. Why? Because life, by its very definition, is not perfect. No matter how meticulously you plan or how hard you work, there will always be unexpected challenges, unforeseen delays, and unavoidable errors. When a perfectionist encounters these normal human bumps in the road, they don't see them as minor setbacks to learn from. They interpret them as damning evidence that they are fundamentally flawed or not good enough. This thinking pattern quickly spirals into stress, self-criticism, and eventually a feeling of hopelessness. The mindset of progress, on the other hand, is about embracing the journey, not just the destination. It's about shifting your focus from the outcome to the effort. It's about asking yourself, am I moving forward, even just a little bit, instead of, have I reached perfection yet? This subtle but profound shift in perspective changes absolutely everything. Let's apply this to the process of learning English. If your goal is to speak English perfectly, without ever making a single grammatical mistake or mispronouncing a word, you will likely feel frustrated and discouraged almost immediately. You might even start to avoid speaking altogether out of a deep fear of getting it wrong. But if your goal is simply to make progress, to learn one new word today, to understand one more minute of a podcast than you did yesterday, to have a 2-minute conversation even if it's clumsy, then every single attempt becomes a victory. Mistakes are no longer seen as failures. They are reframed as essential proof that you are trying, that you are stretching yourself, that you are growing. And trying is the only path that leads to mastery. Consistency is another vital component of this mindset. We often fall into the trap of expecting monumental results from a single, heroic effort. We go to the gym once and expect to see a dramatic change in our body. We study English intensely for one weekend and expect to become fluent. When these unrealistic expectations are not met, our frustration skyrockets. But the enduring truth is that meaningful, lasting change rarely comes from one grand gesture. It is born from small, simple actions, repeated consistently over time. Imagine a single drop of water falling onto a large, hard stone. The impact of one drop is imperceptible. But if a drop of water falls on that same spot, again and again, day after day, year after year, it will eventually wear a groove into the stone. That is the quiet, unstoppable power of consistency. If you commit to reading just one page of an English book every day, or writing a few sentences in a journal each night, or practicing speaking for just 10 minutes on a regular basis, the cumulative result over time will be astonishing. Setting realistic goals is another key strategy for taking back control. Unrealistic goals are a form of self-sabotage. They set you up for disappointment from the very beginning. If you tell yourself, I am going to study English for 5 hours every single day, but your current life only realistically allows for 30 minutes, you will end every day feeling like a failure, even though those 30 minutes are a genuine accomplishment. A more realistic and compassionate goal would be, my aim is to study for 30 minutes each day. Then, if you manage to do more on some days, it feels like a bonus, a reason to celebrate. By setting goals that are aligned with your actual capacity and energy levels, you create more opportunities for yourself to succeed. And every small success builds confidence, and that growing confidence acts as a powerful antidote to stress. It's also crucial to understand that cultivating a positive mindset does not mean ignoring problems or engaging in toxic positivity, where you pretend everything is wonderful when it's not. True positive thinking is not about closing your eyes to reality. It is about consciously choosing a more constructive and empowering way to respond to that reality. For instance, if you don't get the job you interviewed for, a perfectionist, fixed mindset might say, "I'm a complete failure. No one will ever hire me." A progress-oriented growth mindset would say, "I'm disappointed I didn't get this job, but this experience has taught me what I need to work on for the next interview." It's a learning opportunity. One mindset is a dead end. The other is a doorway to future growth. Finally, sometimes the most powerful act of taking control is knowing when to let go of control and simply rest. We are immersed in a culture that often glorifies constant busyness. Working late, studying until dawn, always pushing ourselves to the limit. These are often seen as signs of ambition and dedication. But rest is not the opposite of progress. It is an essential part of it. Just as your muscles need time to recover and repair after a workout in order to grow stronger, your mind and your emotional reserves also need periods of rest to process information, heal from stress, and recharge. Giving yourself permission to pause, to do nothing, to simply be, is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of profound wisdom and self-respect. So, as you continue to reflect on your own life, I invite you to ask yourself, what is the dominant mindset I am operating from right now? Do I demand absolute perfection from myself in everything I do? Do I view my mistakes as evidence of my inadequacy, or as valuable opportunities for learning? Am I setting realistic goals that empower me? Or am I setting myself up for constant stress and disappointment? And perhaps most importantly, am I making a conscious choice to focus on progress, however small, over the impossible and exhausting pursuit of perfection? The ultimate truth is this: you cannot always control the events that happen to you, but you always have the power to control the perspective you bring to those events. And when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at truly begin to change. That is the life-altering power of your mindset. As we talk about these significant emotional states like frustration, stress, and depression, it's easy to assume that the solutions must be equally large and complex. But one of the most hopeful truths about mental well-being is that very often it is the small, simple, and consistent habits that bring about the most profound and lasting change in our daily lives. Think of these habits as a collection of practical tools that you can carry with you in an invisible toolkit. We may never be able to eliminate all problems or sources of stress from our lives, but when we are equipped with the right tools, we can learn to navigate these challenges in a much healthier and more resilient way. And the wonderful news is that these tools are accessible to every single one of us, regardless of where we live, how much money we have, or what our personal circumstances are. One of the most potent, yet most overlooked tools is something we all do every moment of every day without giving it a second thought: breathing. It might sound almost too simple to be effective, but consciously learning how to use your breath is one of the fastest ways to calm your nervous system and bring a sense of peace to your body and mind. When we feel frustrated, anxious, or stressed, our breathing pattern automatically changes. It becomes rapid and shallow, centered high up in our chest. This type of breathing sends a distress signal to our brain, activating the fight or flight response, which in turn releases stress hormones and increases our feeling of anxiety even more. It's a vicious cycle. By intentionally slowing down your breath, taking deep, full breaths that originate from your diaphragm, and focusing your attention on the physical sensation of the air moving in and out of your body, you send a powerful counter-signal to your brain. This signal says, "It's okay. I am safe. The danger has passed." A very simple and effective technique is called box breathing. You simply inhale slowly to a count of 4. Gently hold your breath for a count of 4. Exhale slowly to a count of 4, and then hold the breath out for a count of 4. Repeating this cycle for just a minute or two can dramatically reduce feelings of tension. It's a tool you can use discreetly, anytime, anywhere. Before a difficult conversation, during a stressful meeting, or even while stuck in a traffic jam. Another incredibly helpful tool is journaling. The act of writing down your thoughts and feelings might seem a bit old-fashioned in our digital age, but its benefits are backed by a great deal of research. When we feel overwhelmed, our minds can feel like a chaotic, messy room with worries, fears, and negative thoughts scattered everywhere. Journaling acts as a process of tidying up that room. When you transfer your thoughts from your head onto a piece of paper, you give them form and structure. This act of externalizing your thoughts allows you to see them more objectively. You might discover that a worry that felt enormous in your mind looks much smaller and more manageable when it's written down. Or you might start to notice recurring patterns in your thinking or your moods, like realizing that you consistently feel most stressed on a particular day of the week, which can help you to proactively address the cause. Some people find great value in keeping a gratitude journal, where each evening they write down 3 specific things they were grateful for that day. This simple practice doesn't erase difficulties, but it trains the brain to actively scan for and focus on the positive aspects of life, which can shift your overall perspective over time. Physical movement or exercise is another tool that is often valued for the wrong reasons. Many people associate exercise solely with physical goals like losing weight or building muscle, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful natural medicines available for our mental and emotional health. When we move our bodies, whether that means going for a run, dancing in the living room, swimming, or just taking a brisk walk in the park, our brain releases endorphins and other neurochemicals that act as natural mood elevators and stress reducers. Think of physical activity as pressing a mental reset button. You don't need to have a gym membership or expensive equipment. Even a 20-minute walk outside, where you can feel the sun on your skin and hear the sounds of nature, can be enough to clear your head, interrupt a negative thought cycle, and infuse your body with fresh energy. Healthy, supportive conversations are also absolutely essential for our well-being. When we are feeling stressed, sad, or overwhelmed, our natural instinct can be to withdraw, to hide ourselves away from the world. But connection is a fundamental human need, and sharing our struggles with a trusted friend, a family member, or a mentor can be incredibly healing. Expressing our feelings in words is like opening a window in a stuffy room. It lets the fresh air in. It helps us feel less alone in our experience. Sometimes, just the act of saying your worries out loud can make them feel less intimidating. And at other times, hearing another person's perspective can offer us a solution or a way of looking at the problem that we couldn't see on our own. Finally, the power of routines should not be underestimated. Our modern lives can often feel chaotic and unpredictable, and a consistent routine can provide a comforting sense of stability and structure. Something as simple as waking up at roughly the same time each day, having a healthy breakfast, or establishing a calming ritual before bed, like reading a few pages of a book or listening to quiet music, can act as an anchor in your day. These small, predictable steps build a framework that makes it easier to handle the unexpected challenges that inevitably arise. You can think of your routines as invisible walls that help to protect your time and energy. Without them, the demands of the world, along with frustration and stress, can invade your life more easily. With them, you create a safe, predictable space for yourself to rest and recharge. Different cultures have long understood the power of these habits. In many Eastern traditions, for example, meditation is a daily practice where people sit in silence, focusing on their breath and observing their thoughts without judgment. This practice has been scientifically shown to reduce stress and improve focus. In many Nordic countries, there is a strong cultural emphasis on friluftsliv, or spending time outdoors in nature, regardless of the weather. This deep connection with the natural world serves as a constant reminder that we are part of something much larger than our own individual problems. These examples show us that there is no single right tool for everyone. The best tool is the one that resonates with you, that fits into your life, and that you are willing to practice consistently. The most important thing to remember is that you don't have to try to implement all of these changes at once. That would just create more stress. Instead, start small. Choose just one tool that speaks to you. Maybe it's the box breathing. Maybe it's writing one sentence in a journal each night. Maybe it's a 10-minute walk after lunch. And commit to practicing it regularly. Over time, these small, consistent actions will build upon each other, creating a strong foundation of emotional resilience. It's just like learning English. You wouldn't expect to become fluent by memorizing the entire dictionary in one day. You learn one new word, you practice one new sentence, and over time, your ability grows. In the exact same way, one small, healthy habit practiced each day will build an inner strength that can protect you and support you during life's most difficult times. So, as you reflect on this, ask yourself, which one of these tools feels most accessible to me right now? Could I take just 5 minutes for myself today to simply breathe? Could I try writing down one thought that's on my mind before I go to sleep tonight? Could I call a friend I trust, just to connect? These small steps may seem insignificant, but they hold the power to create monumental change over time. Now that we have journeyed through the landscapes of frustration, stress, and depression, and explored some of the practical tools that can help us navigate them, I want to gently slow things down. I want to speak directly to you, the person listening right now. This is the part of our conversation where I invite you to move from being a passive listener to an active reflector. Because the most profound truth about personal growth is that change doesn't happen just from hearing good advice. It happens when we take that advice and use it as a mirror, asking ourselves honest questions and then making small but conscious decisions to act on what we discover. So, let me ask you this simple yet powerful question. What is one small habit that you can begin or change today? I don't mean tomorrow or next week, or when life magically becomes less complicated. I mean today, right now. It does not need to be a grand, life-altering gesture. In fact, it is often the small, humble actions that yield the most sustainable results because they are realistic and achievable. Perhaps your one small habit could be a decision to take a 10-minute walk during your lunch break, just to get some fresh air and move your body. Perhaps it could be a commitment to turn off your phone and all other screens 30 minutes before you plan to go to sleep, to give your mind a chance to unwind. Maybe you could decide to write down just one thing you are grateful for in a notebook before you turn out the lights. Or maybe the habit you choose is as simple and as internal as vowing to pause and take 3 slow, deep breaths before you respond to a stressful email or a difficult person. From the outside, these actions might seem insignificant, but on the inside, in the private world of your mind and your heart, they send a powerful and loving message to yourself. That message is, I am worthy of care. I am taking care of myself. I am in control of my responses. Here is another question for you to sit with for a moment. What is one small action you could take that would reduce your current level of stress, even by just 1%? Take a moment to mentally scan your current day or the week ahead. Where in your life do you feel the most pressure, the most tension? Is it in your work environment? Is it related to your studies? Is it in your responsibilities to your family? Try to picture one specific situation that typically makes you feel stressed or anxious. Now, ask yourself, what is one tiny, minuscule thing I could do differently in that moment? It might be a physical action, like consciously unclenching your jaw or dropping your shoulders. It might be a mental action, like changing the self-critical voice in your head to a more compassionate one. Or it could simply be the act of giving yourself permission to step away from the situation for just 2 minutes to reset. We often believe that reducing stress requires a massive change in our external circumstances, but so often, the real power lies in changing our internal reaction to those circumstances. As you engage in this reflection, I want to deeply encourage you to practice observing your emotions with a sense of gentle curiosity, rather than harsh judgment. All too often, we categorize our feelings as either good or bad. We feel a surge of frustration, and our immediate thought is, "This is a bad feeling. I shouldn't be feeling this way." We feel the weight of stress, and we tell ourselves, "I'm weak for not being able to handle this better." We feel the ache of sadness, and we conclude, "I must be failing at life." But your emotions are not your enemies. They are simply messengers. They are neutral signals, like the traffic lights on a busy street. A red light doesn't mean your car is broken or that you are a bad driver. It is simply an instruction to pause, to stop, and to pay attention to your surroundings before you proceed. In the exact same way, when you feel frustration, stress, or sadness, it is not a sign that you are broken or flawed. It is simply a signal from your inner self that something in your life requires your kind and compassionate attention. Consistency is the golden thread that weaves all of these practices together. Taking care of your emotional and mental health is not a one-time event. It is a daily practice, much like brushing your teeth. You don't brush your teeth vigorously for one day and then expect them to remain healthy for the rest of the year. You do it every single day, because you understand that small, consistent actions are what create lasting health. The same principle applies to your emotional well-being. Practicing deep breathing, journaling, moving your body, connecting with others. These tools only deliver their true benefits when they become a regular part of your life. It is the consistency of the practice that builds your inner strength and resilience, not one single dramatic effort. And patience is the gentle handmaiden to consistency. We live in a world that worships speed. We want instant downloads, quick fixes, and overnight transformations. But emotional healing and growth do not operate on that timeline. Think again about your journey with the English language. You don't become fluent in a week. You learn one word and then another. You practice one conversation and then another. Slowly, patiently, day by day, your fluency builds. The same is true for learning to manage frustration, stress, and depression. Progress is not always a straight line, and it is often not immediately visible. But with patience and persistent effort, it will come. So, I want to leave you with this heartfelt encouragement. Please do not underestimate the immense power of your own small, consistent steps. Even on the days when you feel like you are moving at a snail's pace, remember that slow progress is still progress. Be gentle with yourself on this journey. Learn to observe your emotions without attaching harsh judgment to them. And make a point to celebrate your small victories. Celebrate the one time you chose to pause and breathe instead of reacting with anger. Celebrate the evening you took the time to write down your feelings instead of letting them swirl around in your head. These small triumphs matter more than you know. As you are listening to my voice right now, perhaps you can pause for just a breath and answer this question silently to yourself. What is one small, kind action I can take for myself today that will bring me just a little more peace? And if even that question feels too large, narrow your focus even further. What can I do in the next 10 minutes that would help me feel calmer, lighter, or more supported? That is how real change begins. Not with giant, intimidating leaps, but with one single, mindful step at a time. As we bring this episode of English in Fluency to a close, let's take one final gentle moment to gather the threads of everything we have explored together today. We've had an honest conversation about frustration, stress, and depression. And it's so important to remember that each of these experiences is distinct. Frustration is that immediate, sharp feeling of being blocked from a goal. Stress is that heavy, overwhelming feeling of carrying too many pressures at once. And depression is a deeper, more persistent condition that can affect our energy, our interests, and the very lens through which we see ourselves and the world. Understanding these differences is the crucial first step toward managing them with wisdom. Because you cannot effectively respond to something you do not first understand. The central message, the one I truly hope you carry with you from our time together, is this: your emotions do not have to control your life. You are the one in the driver's seat. Life will inevitably bring challenges, unexpected difficulties, and moments that will test your resilience. You will feel frustrated. You will feel stressed. You will feel sad. But you are not powerless. By becoming more aware of your feelings, by reflecting on the messages they carry, and by consistently using practical tools like conscious breathing, journaling, physical movement, and other small, healthy habits, you can learn to navigate these emotional waters in a much healthier and more empowered way. You can choose how to act, how to think, and how to care for yourself, even when life feels its most difficult. This is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending they do not exist. It is about learning to listen to them with kindness, understanding what they are trying to tell you, and then making conscious choices that support your long-term well-being. I also want to remind you, with absolute certainty, that you are capable of change. No matter where you find yourself today, no matter how heavy your mind or heart may feel, positive change is always possible. It may not happen overnight, but it does happen through the steady accumulation of small, consistent actions over time. Think one last time about your journey with English. No one becomes fluent in a single day. Each new word, each practice conversation, each moment of listening, they all add up to create fluency. The exact same principle applies to building your emotional strength. Every time you choose to pause and breathe instead of reacting with anger, every time you write down your thoughts instead of letting them consume you, every time you go for a short walk or reach out to a friend, you are building resilience. You are building self-awareness. These small steps matter, even and especially on the days when progress feels slow. So here is my final, gentle call to action for you. Take a moment right now to reflect on your own habits. What is one small, kind action you could start today to take better care of your mind and your emotional well-being? Perhaps it is 5 minutes of quiet breathing, a short walk without your phone, or writing one single sentence in a journal tonight. If this episode resonated with you, consider sharing it with a friend or family member who might also benefit from this conversation. Talking about these topics helps to break the silence and reminds us that we are not alone. And of course, I warmly invite you back for the next episode of English in Fluency, where we will continue to explore meaningful topics that help us grow, reflect, and improve our lives and our English skills together. Remember, every small step counts. You are not alone on this journey. You have the power to take control, to make changes, and to create a healthier, more compassionate relationship with your own emotions. Be patient with yourself. Stay consistent in your efforts, and believe in your capacity to grow. Life will bring its storms, but with awareness, gentle action, and dedicated self-care, you can learn to navigate them with strength, wisdom, and a quiet confidence. Thank you for sharing this time with me here at English in Fluency. Until next time, take good care of your mind, your heart, and your words. Goodbye for now.